Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lattes on My Mind.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Felina.
And I'm David.
This week, we're going to be talking about Sasquatch. Is he out there?
We'll find out. So grab your lattes and join us for the journey. So before we get started today, we just wanted to go ahead and put out a little disclaimer that we are having a guest on and we are going to be respectful of their beliefs and their views. And if it's not what you believe, that's okay. And we just wanted to provide something for everybody.
And it also might not even be what we believe. However, we think it is important to have all sorts of viewpoints on this podcast.
Exactly.
And we want to be respectful of everyone's beliefs. So if this is not your cup of tea kind of episode, skip this one and join us next week.
So who do we have with us today, Hannah?
We have David. This is my brother, David. He is, 6 years older than me?
Yes.
He's like, yeah, I think so.
Put me on the spot.
Numbers are hard. So me and David kind of grew up as sidekicks. I think we were partners in crime, maybe.
Pretty much.
He taught me my love of swords. So I have all my Lord of the Rings swords on my walls.
And maybe coffee.
Maybe coffee.
So this is like the one who got you into it.
Yep.
And then you got me into it.
Yeah,
It's come full circle.
He was my idol. No, just kidding.
The coffee OG.
Yes. We did a lot of stupid things. We made home videos together.
Those are the best.
Do you want to talk about that?
One. Not really.
He said no comment.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. But David is obsessed with Sasquatch, who I've been told not to call Bigfoot.
And we'll get into why, right?
Yes, correct. We had a quick conversation beforehand about the difference between Sasquatch and Bigfoot. So
let's get into it.
Okay. So Sasquatch versus Bigfoot. One of the big reasons why I prefer to call it Sasquatch is because the term Bigfoot was coined off of a hoax. It was back like in the 50s and 60s. There was a construction site that was having basically like sabotage happening on the construction site, trying to have it shut down from whatever it was that they were doing construction on. And these gentlemen had made these big casts because there was this rumor in the area of like this ape-man coming around, and he was like tearing up the campsite and tearing up the construction site and all. So him and his brother actually made wooden footprints, or like feet, that they jumped on and did Bigfoot footprints. And when it came out in the newspaper, they coined it Bigfoot sabotaging like construction site or whatever. And then that's where it took off. So the term Bigfoot is actually based off of a hoax, which is the reason why I'm like, I don't believe that the creature itself is a hoax. There are hoaxes out there. And I call all of those, it's a Bigfoot sighting as opposed to a Sasquatch sighting.
Okay.
So they're not the same then. One's fake, one's the real thing.
In my mind. I mean, I'm not like one of those sticklers where if somebody's like actually talking about the creature and believes that this creature exists and they're calling it Bigfoot, I'm not gonna be like, well, actually, excuse me, sir, you shouldn't be referring to it as Bigfoot if you actually believe it exists.
Yeah.
But that's how I kind of differentiate the two, because like I said in the article about a hoax, that's where the term Bigfoot came from. And there's like newspaper articles back from like the 1800s about people seeing like ape men or mountain devils, or for some reason they call them boogers.
I heard that
people say that the original term the term boogeyman originated from, because it's like, watch out, don't go out at night because the boogeyman's gonna get you.
The boogeyman booger.
The boogeyman.
So fun little factoid
That's
there.
fun. I didn't know that.
Is this leading up to the, so is the construction site the precursor of the like famous one of the Sasquatch walking, like the same site?
The Patterson Gimlin film,
Yeah.
that was a completely different instance. And I can talk about that a little bit
Okay.
as part of like that's one of the biggest controversies, that video. People act like that's the only credible video of Bigfoot that's out
Right.
there.
Right.
And then on one side of the argument, it's held up as basically like the holy grail of Bigfoot sightings.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, it's held up as like, here's evidence of why this thing is a hoax. Because look at this. This looks so fake.
Yeah.
So
Right. So I got into Bigfoot because of that old documentary we watched. And that was in
yeah,
it, right? Because the guys were like talking about like, oh, it couldn't have made that weight, like that much weight if it was a human. I remember. But the thing I remember about the documentary we always talk about, like it was so creepy because the sound effects, because it was an old documentary. So they're already creepy.
yeah.
And it made that noise that was like, 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 and that's what I always think of. So whenever I'm watching Bigfoot stuff, I'm like, demon noise. Like that's what
Yeah.
I think of.
And it's funny because in the documentary, they show the Patterson Gimlin film, like the clip from the Patterson Gimlin
Yeah.
film, probably like 50 times
Yeah.
in
And
like
that's
the
what,
1 hour documentary. And
yeah.
every
Oh,
time they do
wow.
it, that like noise in the background while it's like walking along. And it's like, oh, why are they doing that? It's creepy.
It's creepy. It's creepy. Okay. So one's a hoax and one you think is real.
So first off, I kind of wanted to like open up people's minds to the impossibility of a creature existing. Um, because people are often, it's weird, but Bigfoot is kind of like a divider. You start talking about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and people instantly like take a side.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm like, you know, if you're a critic of Bigfoot, if you're a non-believer, or if you are a believer, which I wouldn't necessarily call myself a believer, I'm convinced by the evidence,
Right.
which I think points to the actual existence of a creature. Um, but if you're a critic, I would just say open up your mind to the impossibility. So what if I told you there's a creature that exists that has lungs, but it can't use them to breathe with. It has eyes, but it can't use them to see with. It finds its prey by smelling underwater, and it can live up to 10 years without eating. Would that sound like a creature that exists?
No.
No. No. it
Smelling
wouldn't.
underwater.
But is it just a fish? Is it like a shark? Is this what you're
No,
going to tell
it's
me?
actually a salamander called the
Oh.
OLM. And it lives in caves. And the reason that it can't see is because there's literally no light in its habitation. So it doesn't need its eyes. It basically uses like smell, and it also senses electrical impulses from other living creatures in the water. And that's how
Oh.
it like
Oh.
navigates.
It's like I was watching this movie one time, and I think it might have been like 47 meters down, the like uncaged version.
Oh.
And it was like the shark was like in like these ruins underwater for so long. And it was so pitch black that it like didn't even, it was completely blind, and it had just adapted to that lifestyle. And it was just like,
Oh
it
my
was hunting
gosh.
them, but it couldn't see them. And they were like,
Yeah,
how is it doing that?
How is
It's
it doing
wild.
that? Okay, that's creepy.
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I could go through multiple like factoids of creatures that actually do exist. We have proof that they exist.
Mhm.
There's documentation and all this other stuff that if you just go by like what people know about it, it sounds impossible. So I'm
Right.
just, ask people to basically kind of like open up your minds and listen to some of the evidence that I'm going to present, and just see, open up your mind to the possibility of Sasquatch existing. I
Well,
can't definitively say yes, he exists, and here's,
Yeah.
right.
here he is, my buddy.
Right.
Hey, this is I invite him over for dinner every night, you know?
It's just like
Yeah.
a matter of faith. No, but it's funny because there are probably so many creatures in the ocean and probably in the woods that like we don't know exist.
Mhm.
That's the thing. It's like you don't even know about them at all because it's so big and there's so much
The ocean
scares
me. We know more about space than we know about our own ocean. So there's definitely little critters down there.
So my mind's open.
Good. Okay. Got one. Yes. All right.
Hey, my mind's open too. Okay.
Everybody else in the audience, bear with me. One of the biggest things that and I'll touch on it, but this creature is sighted like all over the world. Like it's not just in North America.
Right.
They have different names for it all over the place. Like in China, it's called the Yiren. There's the Yeti, of course, most people have heard of, like in the Himalayas and things like that. In Australia, they call it the wild man or the Yowie.
The Yowie.
And of course, in America, we have a few different names for it. One being Sasquatch, Bigfoot. There's a few other names that like the local Native Americans call it and stuff like that. I think it's pronounced Sinakwa. I might be saying that wrong. But one of the interesting facts too, in the fact that I kind of take as evidence that it exists, is the Native Americans actually have 12, I think it's 9 or 12. I don't want to like say the wrong number, but I think it's 12 creatures that they include in their totem poles. And in the totem poles, they only include creatures that they know actually exist. And one of those creatures is a Sasquatch. So, I mean, they've been around here longer than anybody.
I mean, that tracks.
At least on this continent.
Yeah.
So I feel like they would be able to see these things more often.
Yeah.
I feel like it's definitely like they know what's going on a little better.
Yeah. And they're honest.
They know what's up.
They know what's up.
Yeah, and that's also one of the things that I think is interesting. So not a lot of people know this, but when it comes to the actual continent, not continent, but the landmass of the United States of America, I'm talking our states and Alaska, there's over 3.5 million square miles of land that's uninhabited.
Oh my gosh.
That's 47% of the land that is in the United States is uninhabited. And even crazier than that, Canada, there is 80% of the land is uninhabited. It's
in Canada?
over like, yeah.
Oh my gosh. That. Well, yeah.
And within the landmass of Canada.
That's true.
And the two biggest reasons for those areas being uninhabited, I got the information of North America actually from like the what do they call it when the census?
Oh,
if you go to the census website of the United States of America, you can find this information on there that much of our country is uninhabited. And the two largest reasons that those areas are uninhabited is that those areas are either too physically difficult to inhabit, so they're areas like rivers, swamps, mountains, deserts. And then the other reason is those areas where habitation is prohibited. And the two biggest places where habitation is prohibited is state parks and military bases as well.
Oh.
So yeah.
So we're getting parks. Listen. I
know. I already listened to your 411 episode, and I've already been into that a little bit.
Those state parks are crazy.
Yeah.
State parks are shady at best.
Yeah.
Ooh, for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah. So all that landmass, I would venture the proposition of, if there's that much land that's uninhabited, who are we to say can and may exist and live in those uninhabited areas that people would never encounter?
Right. Like they have so much land to just hide away in. Why would nobody's gonna see them unless they're like, super out of their way and like the occasional.
Right. Like, why would they come out to civilization if they have all that room to just roam, unless like someone's like way out there?
They could hide and hang out for, their entire life. And one of the things I think is interesting, which I'll go into basically what I think is like the best evidence to support that this creature does exist, but I'm also just like opening up, hey, this is why there's the possibility of this thing existing. Um, Another thing is people talk, one of the biggest like uh things that naysayers talk about is, well, if there's so many of these Sasquatch and they exist, like why don't we have a better video of them? And
Mhm.
then the next thing that they say is, how come we haven't found a body, or how come somebody hasn't like shot one and brought it back?
Right.
Mhm.
So you can go online and look at time lapse videos of what happens to a wild animal when it dies in like a natural like forest setting. And a lot of these carcasses will say, like even those as large as like a bear, they're gone and covered up within a week or two,
What?
like completely, like if they're exposed to the elements,
Oh,
they're completely decomposed, consumed by other animals and
Yeah.
insects, and like
that's true.
leaves falling over them to the point where you could walk literally right next to it and not even know.
Yeah.
The average person is not even gonna notice that it's there. So that's
Right.
one thing. People just walking through parks like, how come I've never tripped over a Bigfoot skull? Like, come on.
Well.
Come on. I mean, how
Like,
many animal skulls do you just see in general?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's
first of
not.
all, it's gonna be that decomposed that you probably wouldn't even notice that it's there and be covered up by just the regular like leaves and pine needles and whatever else falling covering it up. And
Mhm.
then second, like you're not, the majority of the population is not walking through a forest like we're searching for a Sasquatch
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
skeleton, you know?
Yeah, and like I'm sure there's some like with the decomposition where it's like you maybe did find a bone, but you're like, oh, it's probably just like a bear or something,
Yeah, like
Like,
a deer or
Right,
something,
yeah.
right. And like predatorial creatures are going to carry off like parts of a
Hmm.
thing, like wolves, like they'll tear it up and like either be
Scatter.
fighting with each other so much that
Oh,
Yeah.
one of them will take, like, the leg of something over here, and the other one will take like the neck of it or whatever.
Hmm.
It's going to be spread out half the time if it's anything that another creature is interested in eating and things like
right.
Right.
that. Most wild animals, when they're, even if they're just wounded, they're looking for somewhere to hide. They
Hmm.
are
Mhm.
looking for somewhere to be protected from another animal, another like predator that can either prey on their weak state or to basically just hide because they know that they're dying and they don't want to be like being consumed as they're dying.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
oh,
So you take a creature
That's
that's,
that's scary.
yeah,
Could you imagine
exactly.
you're like hurt, you're dying, and then just
Yeah.
something comes up and tries to like
Oh, let me
eat you
nibble
while
on
you're
you.
dying?
Yeah. Hey guy, I'm just gonna take a little nibble real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ew.
Yeah. So then you take a creature that's reportedly more intelligent, like Sasquatch. I mean, of course, I think that they would either be like taking care of each other to the sense that they would go hide somewhere if they were sick or hurt or whatever else, or if they knew that they were dying. Um, and there could be the argument too that some of these creatures like bury each other. There's
Yeah.
other animals that are known that to actually do that, or to at least sort of like cover
Cover.
them over so that
Yeah.
they aren't being like attacked by
Mhm.
a predator or whatever else, or scavenger. So there's plenty of things that could
Yeah.
explain that in the sense of like, how come we've never found a body? Like,
I mean, gorillas, you can see how intelligent they are. Like they will like, they know when you have like a kid or they'll like protect things or
Yeah.
like very intelligent. So I would not be surprised. I mean, I'm sure gorillas like bury things and stuff. Like surely
Or at least cover up,
cover
oh
up.
yeah,
Yeah. Because they're super smart. They scare me because they're so intelligent.
It's like this. I think I've talked about it before, but the video of like the mom with her baby at the zoo, and then the gorilla brings her baby up to
Yeah.
show it to the mom, and it's like,
yep,
oh my gosh,
It knows.
that's wild.
oh yeah, and there's like that gorilla that communicates through sign language
Hmm.
and things
Yeah.
like that. So they're like highly intelligent to the sense that they understand basic communication and human.
Mhm.
tendencies. They at least understand some of the things that we do.
This is kind of a sidetrack, but you said like they'll take care of each other. So do you think that they're like living in groups because they always only see like the
Oh,
one?
definitely,
Okay, interesting.
definitely.
Right, because how could one just keep, being by itself? Like that
Yeah.
couldn't.
It's
Oh
like,
yeah. So wait, are you asking me if there's only one Sasquatch
Not like
anywhere,
no,
or
like you know how one is always only sighted. So it's like, is it the only one
oh
living in that area, or is it like living in a family group?
and it's just the one that's going and it's like the
Right,
dad
like
going to the store,
sure,
yeah,
like
like it can't be one Sasquatch traveling all over the world, of course, but
yeah, there are sightings of like there's just a few different hunters that have come on and come out talking about like they saw a mama and a baby basically
oh,
oh.
Sasquatch. And then there's also sightings of like just like a female Sasquatch, which the majority of them are sightings of what is thought to be a male Sasquatch because when
mm.
they see the female Sasquatch, it's actually pretty clear that you can see like breasts and things like that.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
So most of the Sasquatch sightings, and one of the theories behind that is that basically the male will sort of show himself to protect the family because
to
Oh.
distract. Oh,
which we can get into. I can backtrack that a little bit with like people have asked like why hunters haven't shot this thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we got a body. So a lot of the encounters that you hear, especially from hunters, people who spend their time like in the wilderness on a regular basis and have seen anything from like, bears to bobcats to, foxes, all these other things, coyotes, and they've heard the sounds of creatures in the woods and things like that. It's almost always instantly recognizable that this creature is not anything that they've ever seen.
right,
Yeah.
They will look at this Sasquatch and like the only thing I can say is it did not look like anything I'd ever seen. And when
right.
it stood up and was walking on its feet, like, because people say, oh, they probably saw a bear, like a
Bear.
bear
Mm-hmm.
on its.
Right.
Well, there's so many reasons why it's clearly definable from a bear. One being shoulders.
Mhm.
Bears don't really
Mm.
have like a set of like, here's your head, here's your neck, and then your shoulders jut out. And it's clear that you have like shoulders. Bears are much more like they walk on all fours. And so when they stand up, their head just continues down into their body. They don't
Yeah,
Yeah.
really defined shoulders. And then another thing is legs. Bears' back legs are super short in
yeah,
Yeah.
comparison to like when people talk about how they see a Sasquatch walking, that it looks like a
right.
human walking because it's
Yeah.
got such defined like legs as
Yeah,
opposed to a four-legged creature standing up. Because even deer, I've seen deer stand up on their back
yeah,
legs.
and they,
And they don't look.
And
Yeah.
it's
yeah,
super clear that that thing should not be standing on two
right,
legs.
Yeah.
right,
Like, as opposed to something that's actually bipedal, meaning it walks on 2 feet on a
right.
regular basis. And that's the way its body is designed to do.
Mhm.
Well, because even I saw that like they said bears like waddle because they don't always just walk on their
Yeah.
like two back
Yeah.
legs. They
Yeah.
kind of like
They,
waddle
They
more.
don't. Yeah. They don't have like the
Yeah,
motion.
yeah, they definitively sway back and forth when they're walking. So people ask like, why has a hunter not shot this thing?
Mhm.
right.
And a lot of the stories that I hear of a Sasquatch encounter, the hunter will either have one of two things happen, or honestly, three things. One of them being that when they see this thing, they're so awestruck because it's like nothing that they've ever seen
Yeah.
Right.
that the
It's like
shooting it
impressive.
never even
Yeah.
comes into their mind. They're just like, what in the world is that?
Yeah.
Like this thing looks kind of like an ape, kind of like maybe a bear, kind of like a human is just
Yeah.
walking in front of me. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And they're just kind of like frozen with awe, basically, of
Mhm.
just like, wow,
Well,
what am I
because
seeing?
how tall? Sorry, about like how tall are like Sasquatch? typically.
Generally, on average, it's estimated that they're anywhere between like 7 to 10 feet tall.
Yeah, so that's a pretty impressive
person
thing to see walking by you. You're not going to automatically be
Right.
like, let me shoot it. You know, like
there's very few
What
people
is that?
that
Let's kill
even
it.
Yeah.
that even reach 7 feet tall. You know what I mean? Like there's very few
Yeah.
people who reach that height. So there's that. And also I feel like hunters just aren't like, if they see an animal that they haven't known before, like your like instincts as like hunters, and I feel like they're trying to preserve nature as well. Like even though they hunt, like they're not just going to shoot an animal that I feel like maybe this thing could be like extinct or like going extinct. So I feel like, and also because people, there are hoaxers, if that's the word out there. Like if I shoot this, what if it is a person?
You're right. What if it's
Then
just a
you've
person
Yes.
killed a
walking on?
person, you
Yeah.
know, like
And that's the next main one where like people talk about, when I saw this thing, it looked so human.
Mhm.
right.
I felt like I'd be killing a person. Like
Yeah.
some people talk about like when they looked in its eyes, like it looked, they could tell that it was like it, like maybe it had a soul or something, or that it was an intelligent creature. Or when they saw it walking, like they were like it was so human like that I the thought of shooting it never even entered my mind.
Yeah.
Because like you're in the woods hunting, and all of a sudden you see like even another hunter walking, like you're putting your gun down and you're like stopping, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? What's he
Right.
doing?
Yeah.
You know, your instinct is to like put your firearm in a safe position and to like assess the situation
Mhm.
of what they're doing. So that's another thing. Sometimes it's so quick that they see this thing, they're like, "Whoa, what is that? Is that a human? Or what is that?" That by the time they've even had a chance of thinking of anything else, it's gone. Like
Yeah.
it's just like
Right. Because how
and then
fast?
So, yeah. How
How
fast
fast
do
would
they typically move?
I don't know. There's some sightings more believable than others where
right.
this thing is like moving so quickly, like it's from one end, like road sightings. Road sightings is a big one. People can't really figure out why it would run in front of a car, but people talk about like how they'll be like on an abandoned road and it's just them and they're driving, and then all of a sudden one will like run in front of them. And there's different theories as to why or how they would do that. Some people think it's just kind of like a Sasquatch game where they're like, see if we can run past the car without it hitting us type of thing.
Yeah.
Me as a Sasquatch.
They'll talk about how it's crossed the road within like seconds, which
Okay.
I mean, your typical road, you know, is like 8 to 10 feet wide or so.
Yeah.
And they're clearing this thing in like a step or two where it's just like boom, boom. Some of that's just because their legs are so long,
I would say if they're that
Yeah.
tall.
They're tall.
because of like how quickly they move.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the last thing with hunters would be that they're so overcome with fear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of instances where a hunter is so terrified of what they're seeing, and then which we can get into this more a little bit later when I talk about like what these things are capable of. They do this thing that's called infrasound, and it basically is like they can make a note that's below what we can actually audibly hear, and it basically causes a resonance in your body that makes you either extremely uncomfortable or in some cases can be like painful. Um,
Oh, God.
so they can like resonate at like a frequency that it basically just like instills fear in you because you're just so uncomfortable feeling
Mm-hmm.
from this like noise that's being made.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
It scares me.
So that's like the main reasons with like hunters why they haven't shot this thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, and I feel like too, I mean, if it's 10 feet tall and you're just trying to assess the situation, even if it's not making the noise, you're gonna be a little scared of it.
Oh,
You're
I
gonna
would be
a little afraid.
Definitely.
out. When me and David used to like look in the woods and like he would joke like, oh, I saw Sasquatch, like I would literally be like, stop, like I don't, just the thought of it, it's just,
You scared of Sasquatch?
well, I'm scared of everything, but
Never would have guessed.
I'm scared of everything, but oh my gosh. Ew. All right, so hunters see them, but what other evidence and things do we have for Sasquatch boy?
For Sasquatch boy. Well, that's actually one of the first things I think is like a huge evidence is eyewitness counts.
Mhm.
Right.
There are over 5,500 documented sightings in the last 20 years of Sasquatch.
20?
These are ones that have actually been like because there's an organization called the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization. Check out
Oh,
their website. It's pretty interesting if you're even remotely interested in Sasquatch, because it's just encounter after encounter after encounter. But in addition to that, what the BFRO does is they basically try to substantiate people's claims. Like they just won't put your claim on there
oh,
of like a Sasquatch without there being other like evidence that you actually encountered this thing. They go to the
okay.
area where you saw it. They sort of like do research on the area if there's other sightings that have been in that area. Like you're just some random dude in like New York City, like I saw Sasquatch. They're not just gonna like throw
Yeah.
it up there.
Right. They
So
make
they
sure it's
follow up and
credible.
they try to look for things like broken tree limbs that are at a higher level than a normal human would be breaking off.
Mm-hmm.
They look for footprints, of course, hair, um, anything that would indicate that they at least saw something. They
Okay.
weren't just like, wanted their little second of fame of seeing Sasquatch or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I find that because I mean, eyewitness is like one of the biggest things like in a court of law. You
Yeah.
have somebody who's like, I didn't kill that person, and then somebody is like, I saw him kill that person.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
You at least have something to substantiate the claims. And even if, say 5,500 of these documented sightings are hoaxes, all it takes is for only one of them to be true to completely dismantle, what we hold to be true of Sasquatch not being a real animal or not.
Yeah.
Right. That's
And
true.
people say, oh, you can't say if Sasquatch is a real animal or not because it hasn't been discovered yet. I'm like, well, discovered by who? You
Mm,
know,
Exactly.
the right person in the right place hasn't discovered it in the sense of, it's not recognized by mainstream science
Mhm.
as
right.
a existing feature.
But
But
I mean, as
you
you
go
said
talk to
before,
5,500 people
yeah. Well,
and
and
it
as
absolutely exists. And that's only the people who have been documented.
right.
Right.
And as you're saying, like the Native Americans, they have them like they only put the creatures that they knew were real on their,
Yeah.
what was it? Their,
The totem pole.
thank you.
Totem
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
poles.
totem pole.
Yeah. Also, like I have heard some people because like there are they say like your memory can like mess with you and like
Yeah.
people's eyewitness accounts can be, distorted and stuff. But I feel like if this many people have seen an animal, and people also try to discount it too, being like, well, they went to the same place as the sighting was. So of course they're making it up. I'm like, okay, but if there's sightings there, like that's obviously where the Sasquatch is
Yeah.
like chilling. You know what I mean? Like it's probably got
It's in the
Right.
a
area.
home somewhere or something, or home or cave. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know where they live, but
Right. Multiple Sasquatches in that sighting doesn't mean people are just jumping on the bandwagon necessarily.
right.
It
You're
could
right.
just mean that that's where they kind of are hanging out right now,
Yeah.
which of course there's other theories that they kind of like migrate so
Okay.
they don't
Okay.
hang out in one area. And it depends on the season because what kind of food are they getting? Those
Mm-hmm.
types of things.
I mean,
So
lots
that's
of
why sometimes
animals
you'll see them there.
do that,
Yeah.
right? Like that's common.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty normal for any
Yeah.
animal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another thing that I think is evidence, which blurry or not, is picture, video, and audio evidence.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy named Ron Moorhead that if anybody's interested in looking at further stuff with Sasquatch, look up Ron Moorhead and the Sierra Sounds. He recorded like on multiple instances these things making multiple different types of noises. And some of them were just like little like whoop sounds or like, oh, but they also he started to kind of like notice that it almost sounded like there were multiple ones and they were like communicating with each
Oh.
other. And so at one point he kind of started making noises back to them and their sound changed. It went from being like a whooping and yelling sound to them being like, oh, like they were sounding like
Like they were
they were talking
talking.
in gibberish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have some kind of like language possibly. Who knows? But yeah, there's that audio evidence, and there's other audio evidence out there, but Ron Moorhead is like one of the biggest ones. And as far as video goes, the most widely well-known one is the Patterson Gimlin film, which is because they say it's a woman if you are a female Sasquatch. If you look at it in the video when she's walking and like does her arms out, you can see like breasts.
Mm-hmm.
So they call that Patty in the film.
Have you seen that clip?
No, I
It
haven't.
it's like the most like famous. She like looks over her shoulder. It's like old. It's
Yeah.
like old footage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was reading that they call her Patty.
It's where like the Sasquatch silhouette comes, where like the arms are out and it's like
Yeah.
looking like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
okay.
that's
So
like the
that's where it comes from.
famous snapshot
Yeah.
of her
Wow.
looking back over her shoulder at them.
Yeah.
But if that's the only video that you know of Sasquatch, if you're somebody who's like interested in it, I would direct you to a gentleman named Todd Standing. Todd Standing has been doing research in the Canada, I think it's specifically near Ontario wilderness. And he has captured some footage that is crazy. Um, some of it is actually like him being out there at night and potentially being attacked by some Sasquatches. You don't actually see the Sasquatches attacking him in the film, but one threw a log at him. And this log is like massive. It's not like some just normal, like, oh, someone
Person.
picked up a branch and threw it at him. It's like
A
a
log.
8-inch diameter or bigger, like longer than a person is tall, like probably like 6-foot log that just gets chunked at him. And he's in the middle of like videoing. He had put some apples out to see if, because they like to like come and get the apples.
Mhm.
And he's trying to video the apples and just like basically hide and see if the apples get taken. And during it, he starts getting like noises being made of them like being on either side of him. And then he gets hit by a log at one point. And then once he recovers and is like looking around in the background of one of the cameras that he had stationary on the apples while he's going off distracted, looking at what in the world just threw this log at me and stuff, the apples get taken one by one by it. You can see like a hand come out and just grab each one of the apples. And then he has videos of this thing's face in the daytime. He Todd Standing kind of has been studying it long enough that he claims to recognize some of their tendencies. And Sasquatches have in their family unit what they call a watcher. And what the watcher does, or I think he also calls them day watchers, because what they do is they only usually generally move at night. But if for any reason there is a reason that they're moving during the daytime, one of them is kind of like their sentry. It goes up to like a vantage point, like higher up on a cliff or something like that, and just basically watches so that it can see if anything else is going on while its family is moving.
Yeah.
So that's why you see
He's
the one.
captured.
That's
That's why you see the
Right.
one like walking out, like looking.
Yeah, and he's captured photos of both what he theorizes is male and female Sasquatches, and one of them almost kind of looks like a chimp, like the face of it. It kind of looks like a chimpanzee. It's got dark gray like skin and not a lot of hair on its face. And then it's got like black hair surrounding its face and chin and nose and things like that. And then another one, it looks like if you took a picture of a human and merged it with a gorilla. It's like a
Okay.
very human like face, but like a flattened out nose. And its face is just completely covered with fur. So it's not like a gorilla where they kind of have like some parts of their face that almost
Right.
looks like
Right.
leather.
Mhm.
It's actually like entirely just covered in fur, but like you can make everything out clearly: eyes, nose, mouth, and even like cheek, like bone structure features. And it has what is called the sagittal ridge in like great apes. They have that like cone kind of shaped
Yeah.
head. Especially in like gorillas, it's very prominent. But it has one of those where it's like it almost looks like you're like that kind of looks like a human, but then it's got this huge like dome on top of its
Yeah.
head.
Huh.
And then there's another one that he says is the female, and it's pretty creepy. It almost looks like somebody's wearing like a wooden mask almost, and it has like black eyes.
Oh.
But yeah, anybody interested in Sasquatch should check out Todd Standing. He's got some crazy picture and video evidence. And then there's another one that's kind of fun that was recorded by, I think he was a farmer in an area. I forget what state it is, but it's called Baxter is the town he lives in. And you can literally just Google Baxter Bigfoot. Um, and when you start watching it, you're like, oh, it's a person in a suit. And he even says something like that. There was a long video initially, but I think they took it down. It's like a short video now if you look it up, where he's like, is that Clark? Is he out there in a suit? Trying to... And then he's like, and then you start hearing him, he's like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with that thing. What is that? And he's just like, what is it? Do you see that? He's like talking to somebody off camera. And then the Sasquatch sort of crouches down and reaches over to like grab another tree as it's walking. And this thing's arm is so long, like compared to the rest of its body, that I'm like, even if that was a person in a suit,
That's
they would
long.
have to have a
arm.
suit with some kind of like arm extensions or something. It's
Yeah.
just like ridiculous how long this thing's arm is and it reaches out. But that's like a little like 30-second video. So all that to say, there's tons of like video, audio, and picture evidence out there of things that are pretty clearly at least questionable of is this Sasquatch? Because it's very difficult to say that this would be a human in a suit for a lot of these.
I was
reasons.
I wonder if you had anything to say about this. I was reading that like the arguments are like every time we get Bigfoot recordings and videos and things, like it's always really blurry and you can't really see them, and like people like run or like whatever. So it's like we never really fully see anyone, like especially with like how good our like phones have gotten and stuff. Why do we never see like a clear video of it? I don't know if you had like any like arguments against that, or if that's just sort of like a happens to be like a well it's far away sort of thing, or
There's a few different theories with that, and one of them being basically just like the amount of like shock and fear people are experiencing when they see this thing.
I would be so
You know,
scared.
yeah, I don't think a lot of people have the, the frame of mind to even think I should take a picture of this.
Right.
Their brain is trying to process something that in up until that point didn't exist
Right.
Yeah.
in their
Yeah.
mind. So first off, they're kind of like in shock and awe of just like, what in the world am I seeing right now?
Right.
They have no hard enough time believing their eyes, let alone to be like, whoa, I should take a picture of this thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's half the time why it is blurry or shaky or whatever, because they're so like, oh my gosh, I gotta get a picture of this thing, freaking out, dropping their phone, or like trying to get not be shaking just from excitement,
Right.
even.
Yeah.
That it's hard for them to get like good footage of it. There's also some theories that somehow these things can interrupt electronics with the frequency that they
What?
make.
Oh, like what, like the noise that they're making?
Yes, and
Okay.
also there's plenty of evidence where people say that they can sort of hear the frequency that like game trail cameras and things like that give off,
Oh.
because they actually do give off like a high pitched frequency
Uh-huh.
that we can't hear.
That they
And
can
if
probably hear it.
Yeah.
that they can potentially hear and avoid being captured in these cameras. And then there's some crazy stuff out there where people have said that they've been recording and they saw Sasquatch in the video that they were recording, and then their phone died and ran out of battery even though it had a full battery. So there's weird things like that that happen that's kind of just like, what actually happened there? Who knows? Maybe you actually did forget to charge your phone, or maybe Sasquatch can somehow, through their infrasound that they're able to produce, can like disrupt electronics.
Oh.
I
That
don't
would
really
be
know.
wild.
Yeah.
That would be like so wild.
Yeah.
Do you think like, so if they can hear the electronics, the one guy got the log thrown at him. Do you think like maybe that's why, is because he was like trying to video them and they knew it was like a trap? Like, why would they throw a log at him otherwise?
Possibly, but I also think like you got to think about it from the standpoint of a wild animal. They have their territory,
Yeah.
and
That's
you
true.
are in the territory. It's not like, you just happen to stroll through the woods and walk into your backyard, and then they're coming out in your backyard like, hey, what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like
You're
it's
coming into
somewhere
the
that they either live
Uh-huh.
or somewhere that they frequently visit
Yeah.
for resources.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
kind of like if you were walking around in somebody's house and then all of a sudden they're there, they're not going to be like, oh, hey, how's it going? They're like, whoa, what are you doing in my house? Like,
Right. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
They're gonna like throw something at you.
I think that's kind of what the thing is. It doesn't even necessarily have to be the fact that he was recording them. He was in their house
Yeah.
Mm.
and they were like, why does this guy keep coming back
Yeah.
to our house?
Like, give him a
Like,
concussion.
get out, dude.
Throw this
Yeah.
log in. Well, and wood logs are so heavy.
They are.
Like
Yeah.
if you pick up like a small piece and you're like, oh my gosh, like how can a human
Yeah.
throw that? Like if it's
Yeah.
that big.
Yeah. There's no way.
You might be able to like hardly roll it
Yeah.
if it's like 6
And that's a
feet.
common theme with sightings too, where people either hear like knocking on the trees from like something like really, really loud, like hitting a tree where it sounds like they're either taking a rock or a log and smacking a tree to like warn that they're in the area and you need to
Oh.
leave.
Mhm.
There's also a bunch of people who talk about like having rocks thrown at them.
Mm.
And when I say rocks, I'm not talking about like, gravel in your driveway type of rock. I'm talking like pulled up out of a river or something like that. That's like, a couple, like 50 pounds or more being just hurled through the trees. And they're like, how, okay, even if you don't believe Sasquatch, what in the heck is throwing?
Yeah.
Right.
What could
Wow.
possibly be throwing that? Like,
Anything that is
Is,
that
is
strong.
somebody hiding out in the woods with like a catapult, just
Right.
launching
Yeah.
at random people? Like,
yeah.
Are you scared
something's
yet?
going-
Are you scared yet, Felina? They're throwing rocks at you 50 pounds.
That's wild.
Well, thank you for joining us this week, David. We loved having you on to talk about Sasquatch.
You scared us real good.
Absolutely, it's been fun. Thanks for having me on.
If you guys enjoyed this episode, we are going to be having him on again next week to continue the Sasquatch conversation.
There's just too much good stuff when it comes to Sasquatch. So we thought we'll let you talk as much as you want. So come back next week.
Yes. In the meantime, if you want to talk to us about some of your Sasquatch experiences or anything like that, you can reach us at lattespodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at Lattes on My Mind, all lowercase, all one word, or on Facebook, just Lattes on My Mind.
See you next week.